Religious factions war for dominance in a land beset by monsters and demons. Ruthless mercenaries ply their bloody trade and bring misery to the common folk, while the rich and powerful brood in their castles and perform vile rituals and experiments. But amongst the chaos of war, plague, and destruction, there is gold to be made, glory to be had, and even justice to be delivered. For a price, that is. Grimdark, swashbuckling, backstabbing, dark magic, folk horror, TTRPG. A rules light, art heavy descent into hell on earth. Also compatible with MÖRK BORG. This is a review of Black Powder and Brimstone. Let's dive in. Here we have Black Powder and Brimstone by Benjamin Tobit, published in 2024 by Freely Publishing. Let's go. If you are familiar with MÖRK BORG and any variation of the core system, you will be familiar with Black Powder and Brimstone. In fact, what makes this different from MÖRK BORG is really its setting. This review will be divided into 3 separate sections: character creation and the whole process, gameplay and mechanics, and game mastering. My final thoughts will be at the very end. I want to start by saying we have excellent, inside covers. We have the quick rules to start with, also Devil's Luck, spells, how combat works, items, wicked wounds, and ammunition. And then on the back inside cover, we have like tables for search the body, weather, enemies, and the horrible index. Yeah, don't look at that. For now though, let's go ahead and get started with character creation. In my review of MÖRK BORG, I stated that the character creation process is easy. Black Powder and Brimstone is very similar, but there are 2 ways to create a character. The first method is what I would deem custom, without choosing an archetype, and the other involves choosing an archetype. When making a character, you're going to roll your stats by rolling 3d6, you're going to roll your health by adding toughness to a d8 roll plus 2. Then you're going to pick a character archetype if you wish. That step is optional. Then you're going to pick a weapon or spells you can wield or afford. You're going to buy your starting gear, and then you're going to name your character. Now, if we do choose an archetype, calculating some stats and our health might be a little bit different. We might be adding some bonuses or subtracting some things from that total roll. If you are not choosing an archetype, instead of rolling 3d6, you're actually going to be rolling 4d6, and you're going to drop the lowest die for 2 of those abilities. What about our stats? Well, just like with MÖRK BORG, we have 4. We have strength, which is like striking, lifting, hauling, and grappling. We have agility, which encompasses dodge, balance, swim, and climb. We have presence, which has always been the strangest to me, but it's perceiving, aiming, persuading, using magic, and also this is what you use for ranged combat. And then we have toughness, which is resisting, withstanding, and basically your overall health. Your actual stats range from -3 to +3. So when you roll your 3d6 or 4d6 if you're not using an archetype, you're going to consult this little chart here, and that's actually going to be the number that you're adding or subtracting from your tests. What about our archetypes? Actually, there's a lot here. We have the mercenary deserters, which encompass the rifleman, the great swordsman, and the grenadier. Then we have the bounty hunters, which include the pistoliers, master trappers, and the beast hunters. We've got the witches, which is the only archetype that can use magic, by the way. And they are the woods witch, the herbalist, and the herod. Sorry, somebody told me how to pronounce that, and for the life of me, I can't remember. Then we have the opportunists, which include the adventurers, the sneak thieves, and the silver-tongued trickster. And then we have the practitioners, which include the vow of war, the vow of healing, and the vow of sustenance. To help solidify your character, there are some optional tables that you can roll on, such as your character traits or an additional skill, so you get +2 to any roll that pertains to this additional skill, which are just minor things like carpentry, cooking, singing. Actually, to be honest, cooking would be perfect for the vow of sustenance because that's basically what they do. They have passions and notable physical attributes. Leveling up is up to the discretion of the GM, which is kind of unfortunate, but that's just the way it works. But when you do level up, you actually get an ability improvement. You gain a +1 and a +2 to 2 stats of your choice. Stats can be improved to a maximum of +9, and then you're going to roll a d6 and add the result to your health. Although if you have under 5 max health, you're going to instead roll 2d6. That's actually perfect for my witch character from my character creation video, if she should survive that long. Black Powder and Brimstone is a d20 rollover system, much like Dungeons and Dragons. The main difference is that there are no skills in Black Powder and Brimstone. Instead, you have 4 attributes. When you want to roll for something or when you're asked to make a test, roll the d20, add or subtract your stat, and there you have it. You're going to compare it to the difficulty rating or the DR. The nice thing is there's actually set limits for the DR. 6 is simple, but failure will be interesting. 8 is routine, but failure will cause drama. 10 is a skilled action, but usually possible. 12 is a skilled action in a stressful moment. That's going to be the default for most tests, by the way. 14 is difficult, but not impossible. And 18 is should not be possible. Something that I find rather interesting is the concept of position and impact. Position determines the outcome of failure. If you fail a dire roll, then things are going to get really bad. Think of them as critical failures, normal failures, or a lesser failure. Impact determines the outcome of success. A weak success is not exactly what you hoped for, whereas a strong success is better than expected. When determining the DR of a test, your GM will usually tell you what the position or impact is going to be. Let's talk about combat. Initiative is simply in favor of the PCs if they initiate combat, or against them if the enemy initiates combat. Then the PCs roll a d6 plus their agility to determine their combat order, and the enemies just roll a flat d6. On their turn, a character can move 20 feet, or 40 feet if they give up their attack, but they still get a free action. Free actions include diving for cover, crouching down, dropping something, or picking something light up. To make a melee attack, roll a d20 and add your strength against a DR of 12. To make a ranged attack, roll a d20 and add presence against a DR of 12. To make a magic attack, roll a d20 with presence with a DR of 12. To make a defense roll, for any time an enemy attacks a PC, roll a d20 and add your agility against a DR of 12. If you fail, you get hit and any armor you are wearing subtracts that damage. In addition to normal attacks, a PC can make a reckless attack or a called shot. This provides a -2 to hit, but you deal double the damage on a success. Risk and reward. You can throw weapons. The maximum distance you can do so is 20 feet, and the test is made with presence. Throwing a weapon is a DR 14 to hit, and throwing a grenade or potion is a DR 10. This is one of those weird things where presence really is this overall stat for determining things like ranged combat, and I really don't know how I feel about that. I've read Reddit posts that kind of attempt to explain it, but I don't know, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. For magic, it definitely does, but for things where, I don't know, agility is required, I would just figure that agility would be that roll. Then again, if you use agility, that just makes that specific stat really powerful. Anyways, I digress. Let's talk about shoving. In order to shove someone, you make a strength test with a DR of 12 against a human-sized enemy. On a success, they go prone. Something that I really enjoy is that each weapon has a special rule attached to it. For example, the Zweihander. A successful hit with a roll of 18 plus leads to a creature that is man-sized being sliced in half. It is cumbersome, so in a confined space, all attacks suffer a -2 to hit. And then we have the Push Dagger. The first attack with this weapon gets a bonus +2 to hit, or Small Dagger. These weapons are often allowed in spaces where weapons are forbidden, as they are technically a tool. We do have some black powder weapons in this game, which is really interesting, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit more punishing when you use them. So every time you fire a black powder weapon, you roll a d8. On a 2, the weapon misfires. On a 1, the weapon just straight up explodes, dealing 1d4 damage to whoever is holding it. Really harsh. Only witches are able to cast spells, but anyone can use potions. Every morning, a witch rolls presence plus d4 to determine how many spells they can cast that day. To cast a spell, roll d20 plus presence with a DR of 12. On a success, you automatically accomplish the spell's effect and you subtract 1 use of your daily total. On a failure, you become dizzy for d6 rounds. If you cast another spell when you are dizzy, the spell automatically fails in the worst way you can imagine. I personally don't like that because, well, I mean, who's gonna use a spell when you're dizzy? I think that there should be some chance of actually accomplishing the spell, although it should be small. That way it encourages players to actually, take that risk, but really we all know it's just going to blow up in their face and they're just going to explode. If you should fall to 0 or negative HP, roll toughness with a DR of 12. On a success, you are merely broken. If you fail, you have died. When you are broken, roll a d6. On a 1-2, you fall unconscious for d4 rounds and awaken with d4 HP. On a 3-4, roll on the wounds table. Then you become active with d4 HP. On a 5-6, you're bleeding out. Death in d6 minutes unless treated. All tests are DR 16 until you are treated. If you really want to up the ante, you can have certain attacks deal infection. These are often caused by rusted or unclean weapons. Infection occurs after combat and will not heal until treated by a healer's kit. Some wounds can become infected after they are dealt, no matter how little damage they do to a target. A short rest with food and water will repair d4 HP. A full night's rest will restore d6 HP. Without food and drink, no HP will be restored when resting or sleeping. After 2 days, a character is starving and loses d4 HP per day. An infected character does not benefit from resting and loses d6 HP per day. So get yourself checked out if you're infected. At dawn, a character receives 3 Devil's Luck. 3 is the max anyone can have, so spend them wisely. 1 Devil's Luck can be used to lower the DR on a roll by 2 before the roll, or activate one of the following dark powers. Deal maximum damage, neutralize a crit or fumble, reroll any roll, yours or another's, or ignore all damage dealt to you. If you activate any of the latter, roll a d6. On a 1, you gain a mutation and get to roll on the mutation table. Of course, like with any d20 based system, there are rules in place for natural 20s and natural 1s. For natural 20s, or at least on a defense roll, the player gets a free attack on their attacker. On attack rolls, either double damage or armor protection reduced 1 tier, or the player may get a special crit effect from the table depending on the situation. On a natural 1, for defense rolls, player characters take double damage and their armor is reduced by 1 tier until it is repaired. Armor reduced below first tier is ruined beyond repair. What is there for Game Masters? First, we get a series of short articles about various aspects of the game, or just how to be a good GM in general. Things like using your best ideas right away, or making sure PCs have interesting choices to make. There's the yes and no but philosophy, which I always enjoy. What happens when there's a failed roll? Spoilers, it's not nothing. Searching for someone or something. Don't have players roll for perception. They simply find clues that point to something interesting. Let the players figure it out on their own. How to make combat more interesting. Whether it's an ambush or a choke point, hazards, the ticking clock, verticality, or even obstacles. My personal favorite, the countdown clock from Blades in the Dark. We then get tools for the GM, the things that really make running the game interesting. We have NPC and villain generators, adventure generators with quest givers, rewards, complications, locations, rooms, items, inn names, dungeons and crafting them, and treasure. Oh boy, the treasure. Look at all that. Last but certainly not least, we have the magical mishaps. If a witch rolls a 1 on a spell check, roll a d20 and see what happens. Then there's the bestiary, over 40 pages of horrific monsters and NPCs to use. We have mutants and bandits. We have the mercenaries of the free companies, each with different levels to them, by the way. We have Puritans, the Orthodox. Those are the two warring religious factions in the world, by the way. Then we've got your spooky stuff like Grave Colossus, skeletons, and ghosts. We've got Nightfolk, cults. We've got Lost Souls, Dryads, That Which Stalks, demons, also lesser demons, the Bandersnatch, changelings, actually really sick picture by the way, candleheads, hangman's trees, imps. We've got the Wrathful Terror and then the Herald of Hell. We also got rat swarms, which are actually pretty vicious, so beware of those. And then we've got the Staggering Pox, which is kind of like zombies in this universe, which is actually really horrific because you can contract the Staggering Pox, and if you do, you're dead. Then we've also got Watchers, and this really is where I was like, man, this is kind of like Warhammer Fantasy, because this would definitely be the rat people. And it kind of implies as such too when you read through this, but really interesting. And then we have NPCs, so we have like Judge, Carmen Sandominera, which, yeah, these are definitely puns off of other things. We've got Lord Flash, we've got the Pale King, Mother Gothel, Mistress of Twilight, and we have the Lord Inquisitor de Vacro. The House of Pain and Loss serves as a location that you can plug in and play, but ultimately it will be up to the GM to decide how it fits into their game. I honestly didn't really find anything special in this, I don't know, location adventure. I mean, it is what it is. It's kind of like what you would find in MÖRK BORG. So it could be used as a tutorial of sorts for newer players, but it doesn't really guide you on how to run it or play it. You're just expected to plug it in and play through it. If there's one thing that I had to say that Black Powder and Brimstone does way better than MÖRK BORG, is its presentation is a whole lot better. MÖRK BORG always felt over the top, needlessly. At times, it was really hard for me to read just because there was so much going on, and the font for the titles didn't really help. Black Powder and Brimstone tones things down a little bit while still being very artful. Speaking of which, I adore the art style here. It really looks like something that belongs in some sort of an animation like The Legend of Vox Machina. It really is a gorgeous book to look at. Character creation is easy. The archetypes are very interesting, and there's more than I would have expected here. It does kind of stink that the witch is the only archetype that can use magic, but it also kind of makes sense. And I'm really thinking about like the Puritans and, you know, having clerics or some sort of a paladin and, you know, that kind of a magic. But no, it totally makes sense that witches are the only class or archetype that can use magic. It's dark, and you're not really supposed to mess around with it a whole lot. My only nitpick is the checklist for making characters could be a little bit better. I personally think that there are two ways to make a character. One where you forego the archetype and you have a little bit more customization, and then one with the archetype. To me, the checklist kind of mashes the two processes up a little bit. You do still roll for your stats and you roll for your health, but if you choose an archetype, the formula that you use to calculate those things is going to be a little bit different. Also, your starting gear is sorted out as well, and you might actually be rolling for some extra things depending on what archetype you choose. For example, the Puritans, or whatever they're called, they have the secret table that you can roll a d6 on, which is really cool. Otherwise, just be sure to read the archetypes and plan things out before you start writing. Playing the game is also easy. You just roll a d20, add your attribute, or subtract your attribute if it's really bad, and then compare it to the DR. That's it. Combat is harsh, as it should be because this is a MÖRK BORG clone, but the best thing that Black Powder and Brimstone does to kind of differentiate itself from MÖRK BORG is that a lot of the weapons have a special ability. Most rolls are player facing. The only roll a GM is expected to make is for damage, and that's only if a player botches their agility roll to avoid getting hit. Because most roles are player facing, the only thing a GM really has to worry about is crafting the adventure and determining the DR for player tests. The adventure generator is there to get you started, but after a while you might find it lacking or you just want something more or different. The bestiary is really where it's at. The monsters are interesting and there's actually a lot here and a lot of variety, which I'm very appreciative of. And because this is compatible with MÖRK BORG, you can actually use anything in MÖRK BORG or, Pirate Borg. But honestly, I would probably leave all the stuff from Cyborg out. Just saying, you're probably gonna get wrecked if you start using some of the stuff here. If I really had to describe Black Powder and Brimstone, I would say that it's like a light version of Warhammer Fantasy. Not in its system, but more so in its themes. You're not going to have nearly as much depth as that product, but then again, you don't really need it to be. There's enough lore here to get you started, but enough room for you to expand on it if you really want to. This is something that you can just pull out on a whim without having to figure things out or really spending a whole lot of time teaching them how to play. I've always thought MÖRK BORG to be a shorter style game because there's that whole doomsday mechanic baked in. But Black Powder and Brimstone, to me, it seems like it's meant for lengthier play. There is no doomsday clock here, so that implies to me that it's meant to be played longer, and I do appreciate that. If you're looking for a game that's fairly easy to play or something with a little bit more substance than MÖRK BORG and also still mature in its themes, then I would highly recommend Black Powder and Brimstone. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Give this video a huge thumbs up to support the series, and I will see you guys in the next video.